If that's just a 50% reduction in the amount of currently unlicensed short-term rentals, if those are wiped out and taken away, and then of course you can basically double those numbers if you do 100% reduction where you ban all of those current hosted rentals from operating. Really significant, $10 million in tax revenue, 6,000 jobs lost. So really significant impact on the island in an economy that's pretty small, right? This is all a very significant amount of overall spending and contribution to our economy. Hey, what's happening, friends? There is a lot of talk all across the state of Hawaii about short-term vacation rentals. It's really nothing new. It's been going on for years, but there's a lot of talk of updated regulations, changes in the regulations, new regulations, and depending on what island you're interested in or you're looking at, it's going to be different, and you really want to make sure you understand what's going on. But there was an interesting study that was commissioned by the County of Hawaii to look at the economic impact of vacation rentals, specifically for the Big Island, but all across the state. And it's got some really good information and numbers around visitor spending and the amount of economic impact that the vacation rental industry has on our economies. And so I summarized the whole thing for you. It's a, I think, 12 or 13 page study, but we have all the information here summarized for you so you can get a high level and get an idea of the economic impact that vacation rentals have here in the state, because it's pretty significant. And these are numbers that I wasn't aware of either. I knew it always was significant, but when you see them broken down, you really can tell that if there is significant changes in regulation to the vacation rental market, there's going to be definitely some significant impacts in our economy. So Cloginger and Sims Research conducted this study, and so I can send that to you if you want to look at it. I'm happy to send this entire slide deck to you if you want to get this breakdown and see all the information in it. But they are based off of 2023 numbers. That was the most recent number that they could use. But really, it's not that far off from what we could expect in 24 or 25. It was a pretty stable year post-COVID and the overall market slowing down. So looking at these numbers, I would expect that they would be similar in the subsequent years. So it's a pretty good measure of where we're at, big picture, in the vacation rental market and the overall impact that it has in the state. So big picture, the role that it plays in Hawaii's economy, big bucks, right? There's $20 billion in overall visitor spending. It's about 17% of the state's GDP is based off of income that comes from the vacation rental market, and the total economic impact is 23%. So obviously the economic impact is bigger because it's not always direct. There's some indirect impacts that vacation rental spending has on the economy, but very big numbers and significant amounts of money are being contributed to the state. If we look at how much of a market segment it is, and this is important to understand because we are such a visitor heavy industry and economy here, is that nearly 1/3 of all visitor days in Hawaii were spent in a vacation rental. So about 30% of days that visitors spend here in the islands are done in a vacation rental. And just on Hawaii Island, it's actually more significant. So 43% of the days that visitors come and spend here are not in a hotel room, they're in a vacation rental. So almost half of the time that vacationers spend here in a short-term vacation rental is done in an STVR. So pretty significant overall. And statewide, visitors spend about $6.1 billion, and it's a critical economic driver in the state of Hawaii. If we look and we want to break down, if you're wondering, like, what do people spend money on? This is a quick breakdown. It's interesting. Lodging obviously would be the biggest one, 2.9 billion, so almost 3 billion. Food is 1.27 billion, and then transportation is 0.7 billion, so about 700 million. Entertainment is 570 million, and then shopping is another 500 million. So that's the quick breakdown of where the spending goes in the economy. And so this I thought was very interesting, and I hope you can see islands here on the side. But when you break it out by island, I was surprised that Maui actually has the most economic impact for a short-term vacation rental. So if you look in Maui, there was $2.2 billion spent there. The economic impact on Oahu is 1.6 billion. The economic impact on Hawaii Island is 1.3. And then Kauai is only 1 billion. But what's interesting is Kauai is about 30% the population of Hawaii Island and Maui. And so it's a much smaller island, but the amount of impact that the short-term rental market has is pretty significant there. 1 billion versus it's just 300 million more on the Big Island, where we have 3 times as many people here. And if you look, it's over double on Maui. So very significant amount of spending on the neighbor islands. Oahu 900,000 people there, 1.6 billion. It's not as big of an issue there, and they have a lot more resorts on Oahu. There's a lot more hotel rooms on Oahu than we have on the neighbor islands, and so that's why a lot more spending happens in the short-term vacation rental market, because we just have less inventory of places to stay on the neighbor islands because we don't have as many resorts. Okay, moving on to the overall economic impact for just specifically, this is the island of Hawaii. So like we said before, 1.3 billion in direct visitor spending, 2.4 in total economic activity on the island. 14,200 jobs are supported by the short-term visitor industry. And then 24.8 million is the amount of county tax revenue generated directly from visitor spending. That's our general excise tax, our transient accommodation tax, and then other short-term rental activities. So really, really significant overall amount of money being spent here on the Big Island from the short-term vacation rental market. And then this breaks down spending just for the Big Island specifically. So 590 million on lodging, 276 million on food and beverage, 207 million on transportation, 126 million in entertainment industry, and then 93 million in shopping. So that further breaks down the total spending here on the Big Island. If you're looking to relocate here on the Big Island, I want to share with you a resource that we put together. Over 80 agents from my team, expert agents here on the Big Island, put together a relocation guide that will help you evaluate all of the important factors that you want to take into account before you move here to the Big Island. School districts, healthcare, employment, all of the things that you got to think about, we put into one home buyer's guide that will help you figure out what is best when you start this relocation process here to the Big Island. So if you want this guide, just click on the link below, fill out the form. We will send you the guide for free. And if you want to take the next steps and have a conversation with us, we'd be happy to help. And so on the Big Island, when we look at that tax contribution, right, that overall $24 million in taxes that are collected, 17 million of it comes from the county transient accommodation tax, and then 7.1 million comes from the county general excise tax. So those are the two main sources of income, and that's one thing that all short-term vacation rentals have to do, is they have to pay these two additional taxes. These taxes are directly passed on to the visitor. So visitors are normally, this is part of the bill when you get your Airbnb bill, these taxes will be added onto it, but this is definitely directly coming from visitors that are staying in short-term vacation rentals. And then overall supply here on the Big Island. This is interesting because we're going to do a video next week about the updates to the regulations here on the Big Island for short-term vacation rentals. And right now there are 8,300 total estimated short-term rentals in 2023. The licensed ones are only 4,842. So there's about 3,400 unlicensed short-term rentals on the island. And these are ones that are hosted, which is the regulation that is currently going to go into effect. And I'm going to do a whole entire video on that next week about that new regulation and all the additions and the process of getting a license and what are the regulations and all of those things. So we'll break that down further, but pretty significant amount of current rentals are currently unlicensed and will need to be based on the new regulation. And then this is what's being proposed, what I just talked about, is they want to further restrict vacation rentals and require licensing for hosted rentals. So rentals that have the owner living on the property or a host living on the property. And again, we'll break that down in general next week, or in specifically next week, so you'll have all the details on that. And this is the big takeaway from all of this, right? Is what is it going to be the impact if you reduce the number of unlicensed short-term rentals? And that's what the study was all about, is what kind of impact are we going to have if we reduce the number of short-term rentals? And if there's a 50% reduction, they're estimating that visitor spending will drop by 271 million. Economic activity will drop by 507 million. Tax revenue will drop by 5.2 million. And there will be 3,000 jobs lost across all the sectors if that's just a 50% reduction in the amount of currently unlicensed short-term rentals, if those are wiped out and taken away. And then of course you can basically double those numbers if you do 100% reduction where you ban all of those current hosted rentals from operating. Really significant, $10 million in tax revenue, 6,000 jobs lost. So really significant impact on the island in an economy that's pretty small, right? This is all a very significant amount of overall spending and contribution to our economy. And so last thing here is just occupancy and the market resilience. So the occupancy rate in 2024 was 47%. So about 50% was the occupancy rate And we're seeing that definitely because the economy is slower, there's less visitors. I mean, that's pretty much in most cases when investors buying a rental, what they can expect in general in terms of occupancy rate. We have high seasons and low seasons, but in general, about 50% occupancy is a good number to use to estimate what your revenues are going to be based on your nightly rents. And so the big key takeaways here is obviously vacation rentals play a really critical role overall in all of the islands, but definitely here on the Big Island. There's a huge amount of tax revenue, right? $28 million in tax revenue gets contributed to the county every year from vacation rentals. There's always a regulatory risk. So the hardest part about all of these discussions is how do you enforce it? Is there going to be a new vacation rental police department that is going to go out there and police these things? And I'm actually going to go through some of the things next week in detail about how they plan to do that, because I think there is some innovative solutions that are smarter than I've seen in the past be proposed. And of course, you always need a balanced approach with these things. I mean, a lot of folks' voices on either side are very black and white. We should allow all vacation rentals, or we should ban all vacation rentals. But at the end of the day, there has to be a balanced approach and understand that there is some economic benefit, and balance that with the needs of communities, the needs of neighborhoods who weren't designed to have vacation rental activity in them. And it's much more complicated than I think a lot of folks make it out to be. But as always, with all difficult problems, there are complicated solutions, and this discussion continues to go forward. But understanding what is at play here is really, really important. That's why I wanted to break down all of the significant, specific economic impact that vacation rentals have here on the islands. So as always, thanks for watching, you guys. If you have any questions about this, you can always follow me at Kona Broker on Instagram. Lots of information and updates there, always, in addition to YouTube. And then you can email me at dylan@buybigisland.com, or I always have a link in the description below to book a meeting with me. We have agents all across the entire state of Hawaii that are experts in their markets. So if you're looking specifically on another island, not necessarily the Big Island, we can connect you with somebody who is very, very familiar and understands the regulations in that market and help guide you in the right direction to make sure you're making a good decision. But as always, thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys next week. Aloha.